Executive coaching, is it worth it? Let's talk about that. Good morning. Today we are at beautiful Penn Stone location here on Ross Street in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I'm sitting here with Rob Skacel from True Edge Performance Solutions, and today we're discussing the question, is executive coaching worth it? Rob, before we get too far into that, can you explain to us what executive coaching is as it differs from business coaching?
Sure, that's an important distinction. The two kind of bleed together, and a lot of people will refer to me as their business coach, but really I'm an executive coach. So business coaching really focuses on the functions of a business, and typically the people who are employing a business coach might be new entrepreneurs, the owner of a small business, really focusing on the functions of getting things going with marketing, with finance, with sales, figuring out how they'll build their business. Executive coaching doesn't focus so much on the functions of the business as the functioning of the leaders of the business. Okay, so with executive coaching, we're helping leaders improve their capabilities. Now, we see the impact on the business, obviously, but it's not so much about this or that function of the business, but really on the functioning of the leader.
That makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. So I had reached out to you through the High Center last summer, I guess.
Yeah.
I was struggling with, I found myself in the CEO position, and I really had no idea what I was doing as the CEO. So coming to get an executive coach really made a difference for me. Can you tell us some other reasons or expand on that of why people get executive coaching?
Yeah, sure. So, it is usually because someone wants to improve their own capabilities in leadership. But there are certain points in a leader's journey that they may say, hey, this is the time for me to get a coach. So, many of the folks we work with, they're relatively new. They've just gotten a promotion to an executive role, for example, and they want to make sure they start off on the right foot and succeed in that role. So that might be a good time when people say, hey, it's time for me to get an executive coach.
And not wait a year and a half to do it.
And with others, it may be just that they've encountered some barrier. They just say, I've been at this for a little bit and I'm stuck, or my business is stuck. And I know there's something I need to do differently to move it to a new level. And so they're saying, hey, I could use some help in doing that. For some folks, it's because someone above them may have suggested that they get some coaching. And I'll say also, typically in those situations, we're talking about high performers who are aiming to go from here to here. Sometimes we're working with people who are struggling more in their performance. It might be more of a fixer-upper.
Sure.
But for the most part, companies are going to invest in executive coaching for their people who are high performers, who they want to see grow to really, really strong performers.
In 2 or 3 sentences, can you describe executive coaching? Like, what does it look like on a session that's a basis?
Yeah. I don't know if I could describe it in 2 to 3 sentences. Sorry about that. But again, as I say, it's about building a leader's capabilities. So the kinds of things, the kind of people who are are involved in executive coaching are going to be people who have senior leadership positions. Typically, they're business owners, and the coaching process is largely around helping them build new habits, change old habits, build new habits, sharpen their emotional intelligence, be able to work more effectively within a complicated organizational landscape. So a variety of things that have to do more with the people functioning than necessarily the nuts and bolts of marketing or finance or what have you.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So one of the reasons that I'm doing this podcast is I want to talk about both sides of a topic.
Okay.
When would it not be appropriate for someone to seek executive coaching?
Okay, well, if you can't afford it, that would be one time. I mean, executive coaching isn't terribly cheap, so there's a financial commitment there, and you have to be ready to make the most of that commitment. I would say if you're in a situation where you're not willing to commit the time, then you're probably not going to get the most out of the executive coaching process. Probably another, I'm thinking of situations where maybe the owner of an organization said, I want executive coaching for one of my people. And I said, you probably shouldn't put the money into that. Okay, and that is a situation where you might have someone who, I'd say they're not real, they think they've got it all together. They're not real interested in learning. Everyone around them can see that they could use some help, but they're not real open to that kind of change. Or they're open to it, but it's just sort of to get their boss off their back.
They'd just be a prisoner.
Yeah, I went through it. I went through the motions. Now can you get off my back? Leave me alone. Those kinds of situations usually don't. They're usually not productive. So if I have someone who says I'd like coaching for this individual, and they're sort of describing some of those things going on, or particularly if they're saying it's kind of a last-ditch effort, if they can't make it now with coaching, then I'm probably not going to keep them here. And occasionally you can get a good turnaround there, but I encourage people to invest your money in the people that you think are the future of your company, not necessarily someone who you think probably isn't going to work out. You're just trying to salvage them.
That's good advice. Excellent. So tell me some of the more fundamental reasons of why someone might reach out for executive coaching. All right, we talked about who gets coached. What are the business situations where folks say, I really need this now?
Yeah, so a really common one is where someone says, hey, my organization's kind of outgrown me a little bit, or I'm so busy, I'm the bottleneck to everything happening, or I don't have other leaders around me who are really elevating our game, so I'm the bottleneck to our growth. That's a pretty common situation where people just say, boy, I need the help. I need to be in a position where I'm working on the business and where I'm developing other people who can do the work of the business. Let me kind of throw that question back on you a little bit, though. So you sought executive coaching, and so what motivated you to reach out and say, hey, this is a time for me to get some help?
So that's a great question, and it was pain in my
Okay,
life.
Sure.
So I was the vice president of the company under a very strong, charismatic leader who was fantastic. But she died unexpectedly, and there was no opportunity taken for training me to how to be a CEO. So it was always the plan that I would be the CEO, but we thought we had more time. And so I was left in this role where I am now the CEO of the company, and I really didn't have much idea of what I was doing, right? And that just created a tremendous amount of dissatisfaction in my job, created a place where I was struggling to want to come to work. We had a couple employees leave during that time, and during their exit interviews, one of them just plainly said to me, you used to be happy and nice to be around, and that's not who you are anymore. And I thought, wow, that's not good. I can't stay in this situation. So I knew I needed help, right? I knew I needed help before, but pride prevented me from reaching out, right? Of course I can run the business. I've been here 15, 16 years, and how every piece of equipment operates, right? I can do a lot of the jobs, not as good as the people who actually do them. But in a pinch, I could step in and help, right? I felt like I knew the business, right? I was selling in the business, but I didn't know how to lead the people in that business. I didn't know how to engage with my employees or the community, or even engage with the business in a meaningful way. So I knew I needed help, but I wasn't reaching out. Part of it is money, right? I didn't want to say, this sounds ridiculous saying it out loud. I want to say I'm worth the couple $100 a month, right? Because it's not crazy. It's a couple $100 a month.
A few $100s.
A few $100 a month, yeah. So it wasn't ridiculously expensive, but I didn't want to say, hey, let's spend our cash on me so that I can get better. I should have done it the day after Mary's funeral. I should have picked up the phone and went, hey, I need coaching. But I didn't.
Yeah.
I waited almost a year and a half, and by that time it was too late. We lost employees. So I was in a crisis. The business wasn't in a crisis, but I was in a personal crisis and really needed that kind of coach.
Yeah, so that goes exactly to what I was talking about. Executive coaching focuses on the functioning of the leader, not the functions or functional elements of the business. Okay, so it took you. You found yourself in that role through these tragic circumstances, and you sort of try to pull it together and just I'll do my best at this. But then you started encountering some roadblocks to your success, and a lot of those had to do with either habits you developed or habits you hadn't yet. Or healthy practices you hadn't yet formulated. Some of it had to do with just some of the people challenges that come with leadership that maybe you needed some help navigating through as well.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. I was hoping we would get to that story today. I also didn't want us to get to that story today. But it's all good. It's all good. So, is there anything else that you would like to mention, either for or against, right? If you're thinking about all the small businesses here in our region, what advice would you give the people who shouldn't participate in executive coaching at the moment? What kind of steps should they take if they want to get there? And what would you say to the folks that are ready?
Okay, so... Well, I provide these kind of services, so I think
get
more about why people should engage in executive coaching than why they shouldn't. But I guess to that I would say, look, when you think of the people who are at the top of their game in any sort of endeavor, most of those people have a coach of some sort behind them. The best of the best athletes at the top of their game still have an active coach helping them through. There's so many folks that I encounter who, if they're in the top role in their organization in particular, they're just sort of stuck with this, it's lonely at the top. And there's stuff that they think about, they need to talk about, that they don't have other people they can talk about, they can talk with about those things. If it's personnel challenges, or even if it's personal inadequacies that they feel, they're not going to talk to those to peers or their employees about those kinds of struggles that they might experience. So now on the other side, things to think about for those who shouldn't engage. It's not so much, gee, you shouldn't engage in coaching. It's more of probably if you're in a position to fund coaching for someone else in your organization. What you want to look for is that individual has some awareness that there's a need to improve and that they've got some drive to make some changes.
Like they asked for the coaching themselves is a good start.
Yeah, or can at least see when you're talking with them about where you see they may need to grow, they can at least acknowledge that, okay? And if you're not seeing hints of that, then maybe it's not worth investing in coaching for that individual.
That makes sense. Excellent. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining me today. Hey, everyone, if you've made a decision one way or the other about whether or not you think executive coaching is, or you just have a comment on that, leave that in the comments below on this video. And if you have a topic that you would like to discuss with me or hear discussed, just send me an email at info@thinkhh.com, and we'll see you next time.